Fox News alert, a Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis flipping upside down upon landing at Toronto's Pearson Airport in Canada. Let's go right to Eric Shawn for the latest. Eric.
Yeah, Jesse, look at that. I mean, really, a passenger jet on its back flipped over, a dramatic and shocking sight. Looking at the Delta Connection crash at Toronto's Pearson Airport, it ended with that airliner, as you can see, belly up on the frigid and snowy runway. Thankfully, no one was killed in this crash, but at least 8 people, if not more, have been injured. 3 reported in critical condition, among them a pediatric patient, a baby. Perhaps that child passenger was sitting on a parent's lap at the time when the plane hit that runway. Also in critical condition, we're told, a 60-year-old man and 40-year-old woman, all taken to the hospital, but officials say all 80 people on board that flight, 76 passengers, 4 crew members, they are all accounted for. It was Flight 4819, took off from Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, operated by Delta Connection airline Endeavour. When it landed at Toronto this afternoon, the wind gusts were upwards of 40 miles per hour. And it appears it landed during some of those gusts that the right wing of that Bombardier CRJ may have struck the runway when it touched down with such jarring force. You can see it just snapped off the wing right from the fuselage. The gusty winds appears that the plane was landing in a stiff crosswind on runway 23. All that is going to be part of the investigation. But you know, Jesse, it's being called a miracle when you see this fuselage upside down that it wasn't worse. The National Transportation Safety Board sending a team to Toronto to work with Canadian authorities. The black box pilot conversations in the cockpit in the last moments of that flight, tower transmissions, all be part of this investigation that, by the way, happens to be the 4th airline incident that we've seen just in the last month, especially after that horrible midair collision at Reagan National Airport. Waiting for a news conference on the very latest on this. But, you know, thankfully, people have walked out. No one was killed. Jesse.
All right. Eric, thank you so much. And now to this. NASCAR fans giving President Trump a hero's welcome at the Daytona 500, where 47 put the pedal to the metal, taking the beast around the track.
This is your favorite president. I'm a big fan. I am a really big fan of you people that you do this.
We have spirit all over the world, this spirit again. We brought it back, and it's been less than 4 weeks. So you'll see what we do in a little period of time. It's going to only get better, but this is very exciting.
So Daytona was fantastic. The crowd was amazing. The people love that sport, and they're wonderful people that run it. And they had a little rain delay, but we'll go home and watch it, I guess. Some of you will, and others will try and create peace throughout the world. Do you have any questions, please?
President Trump's also driving laps around the Democrats who can't keep up with his record-breaking first month in office. Hakeem Jeffries was left speechless after being confronted with Trump's high approval rating. Check this out.
63% favor federal government's recognition of only 2 sexes. 60% favor deporting immigrants who entered the United States illegally. Is there anything you are seeing that Trump is doing that you are in favor of?
Let me say, as it relates to all of those issues, we're just at the beginning. The price of eggs is skyrocketing out of control. Inflation is on the way up. That was the core promise that's been broken. With respect to immigration, listen, we have to secure the border.
Judge Jeanine, we'll go to you to talk about the Daytona 500. I know you like to put the pedal to the metal. It's good to see the president out there at an event like this. We haven't seen Joe Biden do something like that.
You know, when I saw the president, when all of us saw the president at the Daytona 500, I couldn't help but think what it was like. Remember during COVID, we all wanted to leave our homes or our apartments, and we wanted to go out, we wanted to go to the movies, we wanted to do something public. And then that movie came out, Top Gun Maverick with Tom Cruise, and we felt like it's America again. You know, we're out there and we're flying jets. Well, you know, I had the same reaction when I saw the president in the Beast on the racetrack there. You know, it was Donald Trump. It was, you know, full throttle. And, you know, we came out of the doldrums. You know, 4 years of dark Joe Biden not moving. He got elected behind a mask. He got elected hiding in the basement. And we're seeing the president at this Super Bowl, at the UFC, at the Army-Navy game, and now at Daytona. It's not even 4 weeks yet. It's 4 weeks today. But, you know, the same spirit of America that brought us out of COVID when we were so excited is what I'm seeing now. He's energetic. He's vibrant. He's nonstop. He's the kind of president who is not scared. The guy took a bullet. He's not scared to walk out in public. He was at the infield. He was in public there when he was talking to the press. And we should be, I think, so grateful that he won, that we now feel energized ourselves. And I have to tell you, there's one cute little story there. Carolina, who was with her grandfather, President Trump. I guarantee that in a couple of years, she's going to be driving the beast. That little girl that the president was holding hands with is the toughest, strongest, fiercest little girl I've ever met. And I'm loving what I'm seeing. And, you know, the interesting thing is the president is turning these things into his own rallies.
Yeah, you got a crowd of what, almost 500,000 people baked in, Greg. Did you watch the Daytona 500?
Absolutely. You know, if Joe had done that, it would have been in a hearse and the blinker would still be on. Of course, if it was Kamala, they'd stop for a roadie. Trump has essentially destroyed the Democratic Party, but before that, he also destroyed the Republican Party. So all the Dems are experiencing is what we already went through. You just need to admit that. Sometimes I just want to shake the remaining sane Democrats and saying, what are you? Because right now, for the last 8 years, you were anti-Trump, and that's not doing any good. You've indulged the whims of deranged activists for 8 years. That didn't work. And your whole hoax matrix has imploded. Look at how quickly the Pete Hegseth hoax just imploded. He's drinking at the podium. That thing was gone before it had any traction. So I said this on Friday. I'm going to keep saying it. My new role here is to give Democrats advice because we get the most viewers. Rather than trashing them, I'm going to help them. Because that's the kind of person I am.
You
as
really
you know.
are so nice.
First of all, the Dems have to let go of what's killing them, which is obviously the remaining wokeness. And I go back to my zombie analogy. In every zombie movie, the hero struggles against becoming a zombie when, in fact, if he just lets the zombie bite him, it's over with. The zombies leave you alone, and you can work your way up the zombie ranks, become a zombie bureaucrat, get a good zombie consulting fee. That's what the Dems did with the woke virus. They let themselves get bit rather than resist. That only works if all of America complied, but they didn't. So now you got to unbite yourself. Now, in order to do that, and this is Jessica can I think agree with me on this. The Dems live off praise. Republicans don't, because we are so used to being called evil. We've been called evil since day one. Reagan was compared to Hitler. I remember that. So we're used to being the bad guy. So the new Democratic Party has to realize that their survival will not require praise. Praise doesn't build anything. You learn that from 2024. No amount of accolades from the woke, created anything. Didn't create jobs. It didn't make safer streets. It didn't stop any wars. It was ephemeral. It just dealt with your emotions. So you have to stop operating from worrying about activists being upset with you, because it doesn't help. Your big challenge, and we talked about this in the green room a while ago. The big challenge, Trump has found the middle ground on every issue, and he called it common sense. So what that did is it imploded the left versus right structure. You can't get left or right on the high ground. That's why it's a high ground. So there's no left or right. So how do you outflank that? You can't. So you end up having to find new ground. They need to find issues that Trump hasn't already picked over. And that's a challenge, because it's like when it comes to issues for the Democrats, it's like going to Walmart on Saturday after Black Friday. Trump has gone through everything. So, there are some issues that are going to come up that the Democrats could reshape their party around, but I don't want to help them yet.
Yeah, it's not water pressure in the showers. It's not straws, Jessica. You guys are going to have to dig deep. Your name was invoked. Does your party thrive on praise?
I mean, I like it. I love some affirmation. My mom texts me every day during the show so that I have a friend.
My mom does, and I have an enemy.
That's true. My mom and your mom.
Right.
She still loves you, but obviously is hugely disappointed.
Would be nice to hear it from her once in a while.
I'll message her and say that you'd like to hear from her in a positive direction.
Thank you.
I don't hate everything that Greg said. I also just think on these issues, you could take the L and be kind of magnanimous about it. If I was Hakeem Jeffries, I would say, if you are on the wrong side of even a 60-40 issue, I know Dana would go with 80-20 or 90-10, but
on the
some of these where you just say, we don't need to have this fight right now. The American people have spoken. We're not going to be showing up at the ballot box for another 2 years. Let's see how this goes. This is what my party is about, right? And Greg, when you say let's find some new issues, I think the issues are going to be the same. People vote on the economy, right? They vote on immigration. So we need to stake out what our position is, have common sense messaging that really lifts up the average American, get back working class voters, and go from there. I do want to say something about Daytona. And, I'm fully aware that President Trump, this is a big victory. They have control of all three not branches, but houses, even though it's only a slim majority in the House. But, a lot of Americans were having a really bad weekend because of these storms. So over 10 people passed away because of these storms that were hitting the eastern side of the United States. 9 alone dying in Kentucky, people drowning in their cars, tens of thousands without power. President Trump signed the emergency declaration, but he didn't, as far as I know, put out a statement. He didn't go out there. He's not going to meet the families, as far as I have heard. And you say if Joe Biden had done this, if Joe Biden had shown up at the Daytona 500 while there were people living under emergency declarations and passing away in Georgia, a tree fell into a guy's house and ended up killing him.
Do you think this is a fair comparison?
Oh my God.
That you're
Why?
taking?
Oh my
you're taking.
God.
This is not a hurricane event. You're talking about storm. So he needs to respond to every single death?
No.
Then he wouldn't be president.
Well, he needs to, I think, say something when the whole point was criticizing Joe Biden for absolutely everything that he ever did. I mean,
Because
you
he
said
never
that
did anything. Start with
Really?
North Carolina.
That's not
Start-
true.
He
Well,
never did a
we've
thing.
gone through it multiple times about how quickly he signed
was-
emergency
how about
declarations. That
Palestine? How about East Palestine?
How about you just say that
about I just
maybe
say
you
no?
shouldn't be driving around a race car track when this is
Absolutely
going
not.
on?
No.
But that's like,
How
you know what that
dare
is?
you?
You know what
You
that
don't
is?
have
That's
a
like
right to
saying
say
when
that.
there is news going on the 5, how dare you have one more thing? When people go, oh my God, the economy's in and they're doing a pet segment. No, we also do 57 minutes of everything else. Trump does so many things in a day that him driving around in a car doesn't even amount to 1%.
Dana P.
And they had already done the disaster declaration. I don't think anybody in Kentucky thinks that they're not doing it, not going to be there for them. They're the ones who went into North Carolina in the first week of the administration because the Biden administration, they felt like they had been left behind. I don't want to talk about that because I think it's a ridiculous thing, especially East Palestine. They never went. And then it became a whole issue of they never went. And we didn't say that it was not okay for him to go ahead and ride his bike at the beach. We do a show every Monday morning. So that means on Sunday, you have to look for material for what you're going to talk about in the morning. Like, what's the news of the weekend? In the last 3 weeks, we've been able to say, wow, Trump did this, and he went to that, and now we have NASCAR, and then also, oh, you know what, he's going to do tariffs, and he's doing something else, and there were raids in Colorado, and it's like there's so much news. The visuals of what this White House is doing are so important, and it's such a contrast. Think about flopping on the beach for 4 days. Think of the fact, falling off a bike. All of those things are the visuals that stick in your mind. And for the younger people who are now thinking, oh, let me give the Republican Party a chance, might be the first time in their lives that they ever felt positive about America, that they are enjoying patriotism. So you've got the hockey game Saturday night. I was like, wait, what is this thing again? I'm like, well, I don't know, the big hockey game. And everybody's watching it. Everyone's into it. And we had lots of different generations at this one party on Saturday night. And I was looking around going, America can feel like a great place to be. And you need a little bit of leadership. You don't have to be obsessed with your government. You just have to feel a little bit of that positivity. The Democrats have shown that they're on the wrong side of every issue. Now, all of a sudden, Hakeem Jeffries is worried about egg prices.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that on inflation, my last point here, I know we're running late. On inflation, people have really long memories about that, and they blame the president that was in power. It's one of the reasons that the Republicans won 3 elections in a row after that. Then they lost a couple, then they came back, and that kind of went back and forth. I don't think people are going to forget the inflation issue because it's still hurting them. And more. But I'll stop talking.
All right. And we beat the Canadians, Jessica. Who were you rooting for?
Jesse.
I don't like hockey generally, but the Americans.
Thank you. The correct answer is the Americans.
Okay, great.
Up next, I think Elon Musk and Doge have finally broken MSNBC.
They got your data, dumb. They got all your stuff. Elon Musk has his tentacles in everything you're doing, and nobody seems to give a damn.
At places like the IRS, there's also a plan to audit the gold at Fort Knox. This as the left attempts to go nationwide to keep them on a short leash. Today, anti-Musk organizers tried to hold 50 rallies in 50 states, but it wasn't just the streets. Anti-Doge grievances also hitting the airwaves. Watch.
I'd just like you to show that you give a damn, that you got a little emotion about the fact that people are losing their jobs indiscriminately. Just like to see somebody wake the hell up and get excited about the fact that your country is under assault. They're not at the gate anymore. They're in your bedrooms. They're in your living rooms. They're in your businesses. They got your data, dumb. They got all your stuff. Elon Musk has his tentacles in everything you're doing, and nobody seems to give a damn. So that's all I want, somebody to show that they care enough to get off their fat and say something about it.
I'm trying to remember if anyone ever got that passionate about mass layoffs at, like, in the automotive industry or in financial services, Jesse.
Well, I remember when the Keystone Pipeline workers got shelved.
Yes.
No one cried. They said, learn to code.
Learn to code.
Or all those guys that were working for the U.S. military were fired for not getting vaccinated. Or all of the black Americans who lost their jobs to migrants. No one cared. But some people got an 8-month buyout, a severance package with full benefits. It's not really the same. Dana, we are waging a 21st century information warfare campaign against the left, and they are using tactics from the 1990s. They are holding tiny press conferences, tiny little rallies. They're screaming into the ether on MSNBC. This is what you call top-down command and control. You get your talking points from a newspaper, and you put it on the broadcast network, and then it disappears. What you're seeing on the right is asymmetrical. It's like grassroots guerrilla warfare. Someone says something on social media, Musk retweets it, Rogan podcasts it, Fox broadcasts it, and by the time it reaches everybody, millions of people have seen it. It's free money. And we're actually talking about expressing information. They are suppressing information. If you watch CBS News, they don't even talk about the scandals that the money is going to. Sri Lankan transgenders are getting electric cars. It's costing millions of dollars. They don't tell you about that. We tell you about it. It's colorful, it's witty, it's interesting, and it goes viral. That's the difference. They are late to the game, and there's no way they're catching up.
You did a little deep dive today on Fort Knox.
That I did. The interesting thing about Fort Knox is that the K is silent. Did you know that? KNOX, and K stands for Krugerrands, which suggests that perhaps there's less gold in Fort Knox than you think. You know, Fort Knox is evil. In 1933, Jesse, a few years before you were born, FDR declared private ownership of gold to be illegal and then took it under the threat of imprisonment. That was our gold. We didn't steal it from the Indians the way it was supposed to be. It was stolen from us. And then a year later, he doubled the price of the gold. And since then, it hasn't been audited since 1953, 148 million troy ounces of gold, and we don't know if it's actually there. What if it's not there at all?
Oh, my God.
I know. What if it's, I don't know, what if Dr. Phil has it? I have no idea. Poor Michael Steele. If he doesn't do that every day, he doesn't have a job. He's the guy you go to for the exploding head move. He's like that stress ball, you know, the stress ball you squeeze and the little things pop out of the ears. He has to do that every day because he used to be the former RNC chair 14 years ago, and he became the former RNC chair back then, and he's been milking that ever since. It's not relevant. It's as relevant as saying Ted Bundy was a Boy Scout. He was, believe it or not. I even did research on that. What's hilarious about the protests, and then I'll shut up, although people want me to keep talking, those protests are the same exact game plan that is used by USAID and other countries, which is to undermine foreign countries or the sitting governments in those countries by creating discontent. You know they're funding it because the people shouting the loudest are the ones who are on the payroll. The protest really is no different than a guy screaming at a cop because he wants to look through the back of his car because he can smell the pot and the booze.
Judge, the president won a case today with the courts. The judicial branch is saying the president, as the head of the executive branch, has the authority to do what he's doing.
Presidents do it all the time. Everyone in the executive branch of government is the same as Elon Musk. They're not elected. There is something called a special government employee, and the special government employee, there are thousands of them. They're advisors, they're experts, they're consultants. These are people that the POTUS, the president, appoints, and they have to be permitted to do their jobs. And what cracks me up about Michael Steele is he's saying, show that you give a damn. Well, they did. They voted for Donald Trump because they cared about the border in their pocket, and they cared about crime, and they cared about inflation. And then he says, they got your data, you dumb ASS. Well, so did Clapper when he testified before Congress and said, well, we don't really spy on Americans, and then shifts his eye to the left and says, well, not wittingly. His outrage is so misplaced, and it's simply an example of their attempt to maintain political power. It's not about the American people. It's not about us. It's about their maintaining their power. And I just have two more points to make. Now they're going into the IRS, and the IRS has a system, and Jesse, you talked about antiquated systems. The IRS system, I think, was built in the 60s, and it is so antiquated that their IT system has failed all the fraud that they have since identified. And Lois Lerner unfairly targeted 501c3s that were conservatives, and nothing happened to her. That's what happens on the left. We just forgive everybody on the left if they can do something wrong. Well, that's not going to happen anymore because with Elon Musk, they're identifying crazy things like NIH, National Institute of Health. You say, you can't cut back on that. You can't let people go. And the bottom line is they've got studies on the effect of meditation on parrots. It's all waste and fraud so that they can keep jobs when they're not in power.
Right. It's like some of these things, Jessica, you could say, well, maybe they are worthwhile programs, but do they need to be paid for by federal dollars? And whoever the next Democratic president is in the future, if DOGE is even slightly successful, the government will be leaner, there'll be less waste, fraud, and abuse, and they could do more with what they have.
Totally. And I think Michael Steele was talking about elected officials from the Democratic Party. He wasn't yelling about rank and file Democrats. He was basically saying to the party infrastructure, you're doing this all wrong. Like having rallies in Washington, D.C. is not getting the message out about what the real implications of these cuts are. And yeah, whatever Jesse says, I mean, maybe we'll find out next week that it's, as true as the condoms to Gaza. But there's real stuff in stores. You could be. Oh, cool.
I did.
Okay. So he made that up. Don't bother fact checking it. It was made up. You need to talk about the 3,400 people from the fire service that were fired. For instance, I mean, Donald Trump was out in California talking about how we need more people working on this, that you need to be raking the leaves. Then we're firing people. There, 57% of the land in California is run by the federal government. So you need to do that. Firing these disease detectives when we have measles outbreaks. You could talk about that. Go out to your home constituents and talk about that. The nuclear weapons workers that were fired and then they had to get rehired because that was a mistake. Or even on a day like today, and I understand that the plane flipped over in Canada, that they're firing air traffic controllers and they're showing no cause, not based on performance or conduct for doing that. They did it Friday night on Valentine's Day at 7 p.m. So
Not
you talk
Valentine's Day.
about the best day of the year. No, but those are real stories that are affecting Americans on the ground.
All right, up next, Vice President J.D. Vance ripping it.
CBS host Margaret Brennan embarrassing herself after trying to dunk on Vice President J.D. Vance's big speech in Germany last week, where he slammed European allies for their censorship. Watch this.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none.
All right, Dana, Margaret Brennan's claim that, free speech weaponized and it was weaponized to cause the Holocaust, doesn't it reveal a dangerous trend on to justify government control over speech in America?
Well, I thought this whole thing was a real head scratcher yesterday, and I kept waiting for there to be some sort of statement from her or from CBS or somebody to say actually what she meant to say was, or she got confused or something, or but there's been nothing. Which makes me think oh, wait, does she think that's true? Now, imagine if something like that had happened here. The outrage would be incredible, but also I don't think anybody actually thinks that. I honestly don't think what's going on. I think the silence from CBS is very strange. And maybe they're hoping that it'll just go away, and maybe it will. But what is dangerous is that you add to that on 60 Minutes last night, you have this whole discussion with these German officials who are basically saying they want to criminalize criticism of elected officials. That's the most undemocratic thing I've ever heard. And it goes back in 2016. South Park had a whole thing about the Danish government. This is fictionalized, but they predict where people are going to go, where the left is going to go. And they were going to criminalize online trolls, and that's what they did in the show at the time. I think it's very strange, and I don't know why CBS has not said anything, but I don't think it's going away.
Do you think, Jesse, that establishment media figures like Brennan are laying the groundwork for further speech restrictions under the guise of preventing harm?
They tried and failed. And now Trump is going to usher in a golden age of free speech in America, whether the Democrats like it or not. The Nazis abolished free speech. You weren't even allowed to criticize the Nazi party. You couldn't even make a joke about Hitler. And he had a stupid-looking mustache and one testicle. Plenty of material there. Books were burned. Radio stations were censored. Newspapers were shut down. You actually got put to death in Germany for listening to the BBC. That happened a couple of times. So you'd think the media, because they're always comparing the Trump people to the Nazis, would know something about the Nazis. You had record inflation, radical medical experiments on people, anti-Semitism, militarism. I would never compare the Democratic Party to the Nazis because I think that comparison is reckless. Why is CBS defending Germany, though, over the United States of America? Well, it's not like they're England. They started 2 world wars. People's grandfather, people's father, who were older, were slaughtered by the Germans. Not to mention all the millions of Jewish people they exterminated. All of a sudden, we have to start tiptoeing around the Germans? Why? Why? I will never do CBS Sunday Morning ever again.
Thank you, Jesse.
Right, you're welcome.
All right.
Now they're going to release a statement.
They should.
Jessica, why is the mainstream media, we're talking about Face the Nation Sunday morning, why is the mainstream media trying to rewrite history? It just reminds me of, when they were tearing down statues because they needed to rewrite. What is this about?
I don't know. I agree with Dana on the head scratching front. I had to ask Brian over and over. I was like, can you explain it to me again? Because I think she's a smart woman, and I thought maybe there was some angle on it that I was not understanding. But to me, the contrast between what went on in the morning versus the 60 Minutes piece was so incredibly stark, focusing on the word policing in Germany. And they obviously have a very specific history, and I understand why they are sensitive to hate speech and anything that could incite violence. But it obviously goes too far, and it doesn't meet the American standard for free speech. But I just thought, generally speaking, you have the Secretary of State sitting in front of you at a time when foreign policy is at one of its most interesting inflection points, and that we just lost the entire interview. I mean, you could have talked about what's going on with Ukraine and the comments that J.D. Vance made speaking in Munich. Zelensky's comments about having a European armed forces. You could talk about Israel and Gaza. You could talk about the State Department removing the statement on the website about not supporting Taiwanese independence, which is essentially crossing China's red lines. We didn't get any of that because we have this weird free speech thing.
Greg, hate speech. Supreme Court says it's protected.
Yeah, it is, because there is no such thing as hate speech. Because if it's in the eye of the beholder, then it doesn't exist. It's either speech or it's not speech. It's speech or it's violence. But hate speech is not violence. So there. The real problem, I mean, aside from her just abject stupidity, is the word weaponized, which, if you want to find a real midwit, is whenever they use the word weaponized to carry the weight of meaning for an entire sentence, they feel like if they go like, Fox has weaponized patriotism. It's like, what does that mean? I really don't know. What is weapon? No one bothers to go, what do you mean by weaponized? What is that? They've weaponized immigration. They've weaponized crime. And what it does is it's another lazy reflex for so-called journalists who've checked out. This is what I think. I think Brennan isn't even trying anymore. A lot of these so-called journalists have gotten so used to the Mad Lib style of reporting, where it's all Trump, fascism, democracy, Hitler, weaponizing. And then they just fill in the spaces with where and when. And the media is screwed because the public is now way too educated to take it seriously. So I think she has weaponized stupidity, but the media is currently on a ventilator.
Well said.
Thank you.
Up next, Sheryl Crow thinks she's sticking it to Elon Musk by throwing